Hello. Without having class, we don't get to read together very often, so I thought I would take this opportunity to read Book 4 of the Odyssey with you. I'll be reading the text, which appears on the left of my screen, and as we go, I will do my best to advance the pictures from the graphic novel on the right-hand side of the screen. Book 4, The King and Queen of Sparta. At last they gained the ravines of Lacedaemon ringed by hills, and drove up to the halls of Menelaus in his glory. They found the king inside his palace, celebrating with throngs of kinsmen a double wedding feast for his son and lovely daughter. The princess he was sending on to the son of great Achilles, breaker of armies. Years ago Menelaus vowed, he nodded assent at Troy and pledged her hand, and now the gods were sealing firm the marriage. So he was sending her on her way with team and chariot, north to the Myrmidons' famous city governed by her groom. From Sparta he brought Alector's daughter as the bride for his own full-grown son, the hardy Megapenthes, born to him by a slave. To Helen the gods had granted no more offspring once she had borne her first child, the breathtaking Hermione, a luminous beauty gold as Aphrodite. So now they feasted within the grand high-roofed palace, all the kin and clansmen of Menelaus in his glory, reveling warmly here as in their midst an inspired bard sang out and struck his lyre, and through them a pair of tumblers dashed and sprang, whirling and leaping handsprings, leading on the dance. The travelers, Nestor's shining son and Prince Telemachus, had brought themselves and their horses to a standstill just outside the court, when good Lord Eteoneus, passing through the gates, now saw them there, and the ready aid in arms of Menelaus took the message through his sovereign's halls, and stepping close to his master broke the news. Strangers have just arrived, your majesty, Menelaus. 2 men, but they look like kin of Zeus himself. Tell me, should we unhitch their team for them, or send them to someone free to host them well? The red-haired king took great offense at that. Never a fool before, Eteoneus, son of Boethus. Now I see you're babbling like a child. Just think of all the hospitality we enjoyed at the hands of other men before we made it home, and God save us from such hard treks in years to come. Quick, unhitch their team, and bring them in, strangers, guests, to share our flowing feast. This paragraph, if I can just interrupt for a second, is a great example of one of those Greek concepts we've been emphasizing all unit long, right? The concept of xenia, Xenia, right? So this welcoming of strangers, welcoming of guests, Menelaus both references the hospitality he received on his journey home and how he must also offer that hospitality to others. So the next page or so will be about xenia, the hospitality shown to guests. Back through the halls he hurried, calling out to other brisk attendants to follow quickly. They loosed the sweating team from under the yoke, tethered them fast by reins inside the horse stalls, tossing feed at their hooves, white barley mixed with wheat, and canted the chariot up against the polished walls, shimmering in the sun, then ushered their guest into the magnificent palace. Both struck by the sight, they marveled up and down the house of warlord dear to Zeus. A radiance strong as the moon or rising sun came flooding through the high-roofed halls of illustrious Menelaus. Once they feasted their eyes with gazing at it all. Into the burnished tubs they climbed and bathed, when women had washed them, rubbed them down with oil, and drawn warm fleece and shirts around their shoulders. They took up seats of honor next to Atrides Menelaus. A maid brought water soon in a graceful golden pitcher, and over a silver basin tipped it out, so they might rinse their hands. They pulled a gleaming table to their side, A state housekeeper brought on bread to serve them, appetizers aplenty too, lavish with her bounty. As a carver lifted platters of meat toward them, meats of every sort, and set before them golden cups, the red-haired king Menelaus greeted both guests warmly. "Help yourselves to food, and welcome. Once you've dined, we'll ask you who you are, but your parents' blood is hardly lost in you. You must be born of kings, bred by the gods to wield the royal scepter. No mean men could sire sons like you." In this instance, mean means lowly, ordinary people. They must be royalty. With those words, he passed them a fat, rich loin with his own hands, the choicest part, that he'd been served himself. They reached for the good things that lay outspread, and when they'd put aside desire for food and drink, Telemachus, leaning his head close to Nestor's son, spoke low to the prince so no one else could hear. "Look, Pisistratus, joy of my heart, my friend, the sheen of bronze, the blaze of gold and amber, silver, ivory too, through all this echoing mansion. Surely Zeus's court on Olympus must be just like this, the boundless glory of this wealth inside. My eyes dazzle, I am struck with wonder." But the red-haired warlord overheard his guest, and cut in quickly with winged words for both. "No man alive could rival Zeus, dear boys, with his everlasting palace and possessions. But among men, I must say, few, if any, could rival me in riches. Believe me, much I suffered, many a mile I roved to haul such treasure home in my ships, 8 years out, wandering off as far as Cyprus, Phoenicia, even Egypt. I reached the Ethiopians, Sidonians, and Erembians, Libya too, where lambs no sooner spring from the womb than they grow horns. 3 times in the circling year the ewes gave birth. So no one, neither king nor shepherd, could want for cheese or mutton or sweet milk either. Udders swell for the sucklings round the year. But while I roamed these lands, amassing no fortune, a stranger killed my brother. Blind to the danger, duped blind, thanks to the cunning of his cursed murderous queen, so I rule all this wealth with no great joy. You must have heard my story from your fathers, whoever they are, what hardships I endured, how I lost this handsome palace built for the ages, filled to its depths with hoards of gorgeous things. Well, would to God I'd stayed right here in my own house, with 1/3 of all that wealth, and they were still alive, all who died on the wide plain of Troy those years ago, far from the stallion land of Argos. And still, much as I weep for all my men, grieving sorely time and again, sitting here in the royal halls, now indulging myself in tears, now brushing tears away, the grief that numbs the spirit gluts us quickly. For none of all those comrades, pained as I am, do I grieve as much for one, that man who makes sleep hateful, even food. As I pore over his memory, no one, no Achaean, labored hard as Odysseus labored, or achieved so much. And how did his struggles end? In suffering for that man. For me, in relentless, heart-breaking grief for him, lost and gone so long now, dead or alive, who knows? How they must mourn him too. Laertes, the old man, and self-possessed Penelope, Telemachus as well, the boy he left a babe in arms at home. Such memories stirred in the young prince a deep desire to grieve for Odysseus. Tears streamed down his cheeks and wet the ground when he heard his father's name, both hands clutching his purple robe before his eyes. Menelaus recognized him at once, but pondered deeply whether to let him state his father's name or probe him first and prompt him, step by step. While he debated all this now within himself, Helen emerged from her scented lofty chambers, striking as Artemis with her golden shafts, and a train of women followed. Adreste drew up her carved reclining chair. Alcippe brought a carpet of soft-piled fleece. Philo carried her silver basket given by Alcandre, King Polybus' wife, who made his home in Egyptian Thebes, where the houses overflow with the great troves of treasure. The king gave Menelaus a pair of bathing tubs in silver, 2 tripods, 10 bars of gold, and apart from these gifts his wife presented Helen her own precious gifts, a golden spindle, a basket that ran on casters, solid silver, polished off with rims of gold. Now Philo, her servant, rolled it in beside her, heaped to the brim with yarn prepared for weaving. The spindle swathed in violet wool lay tipped across it. Helen leaned back in her chair, a stool beneath her feet, and pressed her husband at once for each detail. "Do we know, my lord Menelaus, who our visitors claim to be, our welcome new arrivals?" "Right or wrong, what can I say? My heart tells me to come right out and say, I've never seen such a likeness, neither in man nor woman. I am amazed at the sight. To the life he's like the son of great Odysseus. Surely he's Telemachus, the boy that hero left a babe in arms at home when all you Achaeans fought at Troy, launching your headlong battles just for my sake, shameless whore that I was." My dear," the red-haired king assured her, "now that you mention it, I see the likeness too. Odysseus's feet were like the boy's, his hands as well, his glancing eyes, his head, and that fine shock of hair. Yes, and just now as I was talking about Odysseus, remembering how he struggled, suffered all for me, a flood of tears came streaming down his face, and he clutched his purple robe before his eyes." "Right you are," Pisistratus stepped in quickly. "Son of Atreus, King Menelaus, captain of our armies, here is the son of that great hero, as you say. But the man is modest. He would be ashamed to make a show of himself his first time here and interrupt you. We delight in your voice, as if some god were speaking. The noble horseman sent me along to be his escort. Telemachus yearned to see you, so you could give him some advice or urge some action. When a father's gone, his son takes much abuse in a house where no one's come to his defense. So with Telemachus now. His father's gone. No men at home will shield him from the worst." "Wonderful!" the red-haired king cried out. "The son of my dearest friend here in my own house, that man who performed 100 feats of arms for me, and I swore that when he came I'd give him a hero's welcome, him above all my comrades. If only Olympian Zeus, far-seeing Zeus, had granted us both safe passage home across the sea in our swift trim ships, why, I'd have settled a city in Argos for him, built him a palace, shipped him over from Ithaca, him and all his wealth, his son, his people too, emptied one of the cities nestling round about us, one I rule myself. Both fellow countrymen then, how often we'd have mingled side by side. Nothing could have parted us, bound by love for each other, mutual delight, till death's dark cloud came shrouding round us both. But God himself, jealous of all this, no doubt, robbed that unlucky man, him and him alone, of the day of his return." So Menelaus mused, and stirred in them all a deep desire to grieve. Helen of Argos, daughter of Zeus, dissolved in tears. Telemachus wept too, and so did Atreus' son Menelaus. Nor could Nestor's son Pisistratus stay dry-eyed, remembering now how his gallant brother Antilochus, cut down by Memnon's splendid son of the morning, thinking of him, the young prince spoke out, "Old Nestor always spoke of you, son of Atreus, as the wisest man of all the men he knew whenever we talked about you there at home, questioning back and forth. So now, please, if it isn't out of place, indulge me, won't you? Myself, I take no joy in weeping over supper. Morning will soon bring time enough for that. Not that I'd grudge a tear for any man who'd gone down to meet his fate. What other tribute can we pay to wretched men than to cut a lock, let tears roll down our cheeks? And I have a brother of my own among the dead, and hardly the poorest soldier in our ranks. You probably knew him? I never met him, never saw him myself. But they say he outdid our best Antilochus, lightning on his feet and every inch a fighter." "Well said, my friend," the red-haired king replied. "Not even an older man could speak and do as well. Your father's son you are, your words have all his wisdom. It's easy to spot the breed of a man whom Zeus has marked for joy in birth and marriage both. Take great King Nestor now. Zeus has blessed him all his livelong days, growing rich and sleek in his old age at home. His son's expert with spears and full of sense. Well, so much for the tears that caught us just now. Let's think again of supper. Come, rinse our hands. Tomorrow at dawn we'll offer me and Telemachus time to talk and trade our thoughts in full. Asphalion quickly rinsed their hands with water, another of King Menelaus's ready aids in arms. Again they reached for the good things set before them. Then Zeus's daughter Helen thought of something else. Into the mixing bowl from which they drank their wine she slipped a drug, heart's ease, dissolving anger magic to make us all forget our pains. No one who drank it deeply, mulled in wine, could let a tear roll down his cheeks that day, not even if his mother should die, his father die, not even if right before his eyes some enemy brought down a brother or darling son with a sharp bronze blade. So cunning the drugs that Zeus's daughter plied, potent gifts from Polydamna, the wife of Thon, a woman of Egypt land, where the teeming soil bears the richest yield of herbs in all the world, many health itself when mixed in the wine, and many deadly poison. Every man is a healer there, more skilled than any other men on earth, Egyptians born of the healing god himself. So now Helen, once she had drugged the wine and ordered wine cups filled, resuming the conversation, entertained the group. My royal king, Menelaus, welcome guests here, sons of the great as well. Zeus can present us times of joy and times of grief in turn. All lies within his power. So come, let's sit back in the palace now, dine and warm our hearts with old stories. I will tell something perfect for the occasion. Surely I can't describe or even list them all, the exploits crowding fearless Odysseus' record. But what a feat that hero dared and carried off in the land of Troy, where you Achaeans suffered, scarring his own body with mortifying strokes, throwing filthy rags on his back like any slave. He slipped into the enemy's city, roamed its streets, all disguised, a totally different man, a beggar, hardly the figure he cut among Achaea's ships. That's how Odysseus infiltrated Troy, and no one knew him at all. I alone, I spotted him for the man he was, kept questioning him. The crafty one kept dodging, but after I'd bathed him, rubbed him down with oil, given him clothes to wear, and sworn a binding oath not to reveal him as Odysseus to the Trojans, not till he was back at his swift ships and shelters, then at last he revealed to me, step by step, the whole Achaean strategy. And once he'd cut a troop of Trojans down with his long bronze sword, back he went to his comrades, filled with the information. The rest of the Trojan women shrilled with their grief, not I. My heart leapt up. My heart had changed by now. I yearned to sail back home again. I grieved too late for the madness Aphrodite sent me, luring me there far from my dear land, forsaking my own child, my bridal bed, my husband too, a man who lacked for neither brains nor beauty. And the red-haired Menelaus answered Helen, There was a tale, my lady, so well told. Now then, I have studied in my time the plans and minds of great ones by the score, and I have traveled over a good part of the world, but never once have I laid eyes on a man like him. What a heart that fearless Odysseus had inside him! What a piece of work the hero dared and carried off in the wooden horse, where all our best encamped, our champions armed with bloody death for Troy. When along you came, Helen, roused no doubt by a dark power bent on giving Troy some glory, and dashing Prince Deiphobus squired your every step. 3 times you sauntered round our hollow ambush, feeling, stroking its flanks, challenging all our fighters, calling each by name. Yours was the voice of all our long-lost wives. And Diomedes and I, crouched tight in the midst with the great Odysseus, hearing you sing out, were both king to spring up and sally forth, or give you a sudden answer from inside. But Odysseus damped our ardor, reined us back. Then all the rest of the troops kept stock still, all but Anticlus. He was hot to salute you now, but Odysseus clamped his great hands on the man's mouth and shut it brutally. Yes, he saved us all, holding on grim set, till Pallas Athena lured you off at last. let me pause my reading there for a moment. So Helen and Menelaus both tell these stories of Odysseus. They also give an interesting glimpse at Helen. Helen remarks how she saw Odysseus in Troy once and, managed to spy out for him that he was infiltrating and seeking information, and she implies that she helped him because she had a longing to go back. And then in the next passage, Menelaus says that how when they're all hiding inside in the Trojan horse in Troy, Helen walked around it, touching the horse, calling out to the fighters inside, seeing if they would give themselves away, and they would have had not Odysseus kept his head, been able to resist the allure of Helen's call. Anyway, let us continue. But clear-sighted Telemachus ventured, "Son of Atreus, King Menelaus, captain of armies, so much the worse, for not one bit of that saved him from grisly death. Not even a heart of iron could have helped. But come, send us off to bed. It's time to rest, time to enjoy the sweet relief of sleep." And Helen briskly told her serving women to make beds in the porch shelter, lay down some heavy purple throws for the beds themselves, and over them spread some blankets, thick, woolly robes, a warm covering laid on top, torches in hands. They left the hall and made up beds at once. The herald led the two guests on, and so they slept. Outside the palace, under the forecourt's colonnade, young Prince Telemachus and Nestor's shining son. Menelaus retired to chambers deep in his lofty house, with Helen, the pearl of women, loosely gowned beside him. When young Dawn, with her rose-red fingers shone once more, the lord of the war-cry climbed from bed and dressed. Over his shoulder he slung his well-honed sword, fastened rawhide sandals under his smooth feet, stepped from his bedroom handsome as a god, and sat beside Telemachus, asking kindly, "Now, young prince, tell me, what brings you here to sunny Lacedaemon, sailing over the sea's broad back, a public matter or private? Tell me the truth now." And with all the poise he had, Telemachus replied, "Son of Atreus, King Menelaus, captain of armies, I came in the hope that you can tell me now some news about my father. My house is being devoured, my farms destroyed, my palace crammed with enemies, slaughtering on and on my droves of sheep and shambling long-horned cattle. Suitors plague my mother. The insolent, overweening... That's why I've come to plead before you now. If you can tell me about his cruel death. Perhaps you saw him die with your own eyes, or heard the wanderer's end from someone else. More than all other men, that man was born for pain. Don't soften a thing from pity, respect for me. Tell me clearly all your eyes have witnessed. I beg you, if ever my father, Lord Odysseus, pledged you his word and made it good in action once on the fields of Troy where you Achaeans suffered, remember his story now. Tell me the truth." "How shameful!" The red-haired king burst out in anger. "That's the bed of a brave man of war they'd like to crawl inside, those spineless, craven cowards, weak as the doe that beds down her fawns in a mighty lion's den, her newborn sucklings, then trails off to the mountain spurs and grassy bends to graze her fill, but back the lion comes to his own lair, and the master deals both fawns a ghastly, bloody death. Just what Odysseus will deal that mob, ghastly death. Ah, if only Father Zeus, Athena, and Lord Apollo, that man who years ago in the games at Lesbos rose to Philomelides' challenge, wrestled him, pinned him down with one tremendous throw, and the Argives roared with joy. If only that Odysseus sported with those suitors, a blood-wedding, a quick death would take the lot. But about the things you've asked me so intently, I'll skew and sidestep nothing, not deceive you ever. Of all he told me, the old man of the sea who never lies, I'll hide or hold back nothing, not a single word. It was in Egypt, where the gods still marooned me, eager as I was to voyage home, I'd failed, you see, to render them full, flawless victims, and the gods are always keen to see their rules obeyed. Now there's an island out in the ocean's heavy surge, well off the Egyptian coast. They call it Pharos, far as a deep-sea ship can go in one day's sail, with a whistling wind astern to drive her on. There's a snug harbor there, good landing beach, where crews pull in, draw water up from the dark wells, then push their vessels off for passage out. But here the gods becalmed me 20 days, not a breath of the breezes roughing out to sea, that speed a ship across the ocean's broad back. Now our rations would have been consumed, our crew's stamina too, if one of the gods had not felt sorry for me, shown me mercy. Eidothea, a daughter of Proteus, the great power, the old man of the sea. My troubles must have moved her heart. When she met me trudging by myself without my men, they kept roaming around the beach day in, day out, fishing with twisted hooks, their bellies racked by hunger. Well, she came right up to me, filled with questions. Are you a fool, stranger, soft in the head and lazy too? Or do you let things slide because you like your pain? Here you are, cooped up on an island far too long, with no way out of it, none that you can find, while all your shipmates' spirit ebbs away. So she prodded, and I replied at once, Let me tell you, goddess, whoever you are, I'm hardly landlocked here of my own free will, so I must have angered one of the deathless gods who rules the sky up there. But you tell me, you immortals know it all, which one of you blocks my way here, keeps me from my voyage? How can I cross the swarming sea and reach home at last? And the glistening goddess reassured me warmly. Of course, my friend, I'll answer you your questions. Who haunts these parts? Proteus of Egypt does, the immortal old man of the sea who never lies, who sounds the deep in all its depths, Poseidon's servant. He's my father. They say he gave me life. And he, if you ambush him somehow and pin him down, will tell you the way to go, the stages of your voyage, how you can cross the swarming sea and reach home at last. And he can tell you, too, if you want to press him. You are a king, it seems. All that's occurred within your palace, good and bad, while you've been gone your long and painful way. Then you are the one, I quickly took her up. Show me the trick to trap this ancient power. Or he'll see or sense me first and slip away. It's hard for a mortal man to force a god. True, my friend, the glistening one agreed. And again, I'll tell you all you need to know. When the sun stands striding at high noon, then up from the waves he comes, the old man of the sea who never lies. Under a west wind's gust that shrouds him round in shuddering dark swells, and once he's out on land he heads for his bed of rest in deep hollow caves. And around him droves of seal, sleek pups bred by his lovely ocean lady, bed down too in a huddle, flopping up from the grey surf, giving off the sour reek of the salty ocean depths. I'll lead you there myself at the break of day, and count you all for attack side by side. Choose 3 men from your crew. Choose well, the best you've got aboard, the good deck hulls. Now I will tell you all the old wizard's trick. First, he will make his rounds and count the seals, and once he's checked their numbers, reviewed them all, down in their midst he'll lie like a shepherd with his flock. That's your moment. Soon as you see him bedded down, muster your heart and strength and hold him fast. Wildly as he rises and fights to escape you, he'll try all kinds of escapes, twists and turns, into every beast that moves across the earth, transforming himself into water, superhuman fire. But you hold on for dear life, hug him all the harder. And when at last he begins to ask you questions, back in the shape you saw him sleep at first, relax your grip and set the old god free, and ask him outright, hero, which of the gods is up in arms against you? How can you cross the swarming seas and reach home at last? So she urged, and under the breaking surf she dove. As I went back to our squadron beached in sand, my heart a heaving storm at every step. Once I reached my ship, hauled up on shore, we made our meal, and the godsend night came down, and then we slept at the sea-smooth shelving edge. When young dawn with her rose-red finger shone once more, I set out down the coast of the wide-ranging sea, praying hard to the gods for all their help, taking with me the 3 men I trusted most on every kind of mission. Idothea now had slipped beneath the sea's engulfing folds, but back from the waves she came with 4 sealskins, all freshly stripped to deceive her fat father blind. She scooped out lurking places deep in the sand and sat there waiting as we approached her post. Then, couching us side by side, she flung a sealskin over each man's back. Now there was an ambush that would have overpowered us all, overpowering, true, the awful reek of all those sea-fed brutes. Who'd dream of bedding down with a monster of the deep? But the goddess sped to our rescue, found the cure with ambrosia, dabbing it under each man's nose. That lovely scent, it drowned the creature's stench. So all morning we lay there waiting, spirits steeled, while seals came crowding, jostling out of the sea, and flopped down and rose, basking along the surf. At high noon, the old man emerged from the waves and found his fat-fed seals, and made his rounds, counting them off, counting us, the first 4. But he had no inkling of all the fraud afoot. Then down he lay and slept. But with a battle cry we rushed him, flung our arms around him. He'd lost nothing, the old rascal, none of his cutting quick techniques. First he shifted into a great bearded lion, and then a serpent, a panther, a ramping wild boar, a torrent of water, a tree with soaring branch tops. But we held on for dear life, braving it out, until at last the quick-change artist, the old wizard, began to weary of all this, and burst out into rapid-fire questions. Which god, Menelaus, conspired with you to trap me in ambush, seize me against my will? What on earth do you want? You know, old man, I countered. Why put me off with questions? Here I am, cooped up on an island far too long, with no way out of it, none that I can find, while my spirit ebbs away. But you tell me, you immortals know it all, which one of you blocks my way here, keeps me from my voyage? How can I cross the swarming sea and reach home at last? How wrong you were, the seer shot back at once. You should have offered Zeus and the other gods a handsome sacrifice, then embarked, if you ever hope for a rapid journey home across the wine-dark sea. It's not your destiny yet to see your loved ones reach your own grand house, your native land, at last, not till you sail back through Egyptian waters, the great Nile swelled by the rains of Zeus, and make a splendid rite to the deathless gods who rule the vaulting skies. Then, only then, will the gods grant you the voyage you desire. So he urged, and broke the heart inside me, having to double back on the mist-bound seas, back to Egypt, that long and painful way. Nevertheless, I caught my breath and answered, That I will do, old man, as you command. But tell me this as well, and leave nothing out. Did all the Achaeans reach home in the ships unharmed, all we left behind, Nestor and I, en route from Troy? Or did any die some cruel death by shipwreck, or die in the arms of loved ones once they wound down the long coil of war? He lost no time in saying, Son of Atreus, why do you ask me that? Why do you need to know? Why probe my mind? You won't stay dry-eyed long, I warn you, once you have heard the whole story. Many of them were killed, many survived as well, but only 2 who captained your bronze-armored units died on the way home. You know who died in the fighting, you were there yourself. And 1 is still alive, held captive somewhere, off in the endless seas. Ajax now went down in his long-oared fleet. First Poseidon drove him off the cliffs of Gyrae, looming cliffs, then saved him from the breakers. He'd have escaped his doom, too, despite Athena's hate, if he hadn't flung that brazen boast, the mad, blind fool. In the teeth of the gods, he bragged, I have escaped the ocean's sheer abyss. Poseidon heard the frantic vaunt, and the god grasped his trident in both of his massive hands and struck the Gyraean headland, hacked the rock in two, and the giant stump stood fast, but the jagged spur where Ajax perched at first, the raving madman toppling into the sea, it plunged him down, down into the vast seething deeps, and so he died, having drunk his fill of brine. Your brother, he escaped that fate. Agamemnon got away in his beaked ships. Queen Hera pulled him through. But just as he came abreast of Melia's beetling cape, a hurricane snatched him up and swept him way off course, groaning, desperate, driving him over the fish-infested seas to the wild borderland where Thyestes made his home in days of old, and his son Aegisthus lived now. But even from there a safe return seemed likely. Yes, the immortals swung the wind around to fair, and the victor sailed home. How he rejoiced! Atrides setting foot on his fatherland once more. He took that native earth in his hands and kissed it, hot tears flooding his eyes, so thrilled to see his land. But a watchman saw him too. From a lookout high above, a spy the cunning Aegisthus stationed there, luring the man with 2 gold bars in payment. One whole year he'd watched, so the great king would not get past unseen, his fighting power intact for self-defense. The spy ran the news to the master's hall, and Aegisthus quickly set his stealthy trap. Picking the 20 best recruits from town, he packed them in an ambush at one end of the house. At the other he ordered a banquet dressed and spread, and went to welcome the conquering hero Agamemnon, went with team and chariot, and a mind aswarm with evil. Up from the shore he led the king. He ushered him in, suspecting nothing of all his doom. He feasted well, then cut him down as a man cuts down some ox at the trough. Not one of your brother's men-at-arms was left alive, none of Aegisthus either's, all killed in the palace. So Proteus said, and his story crushed my heart. I knelt down in the sand and wept. I'd no desire to go on living and see the rising light of day. But once I'd filled my fill of tears, and writhing there, the old man in the sea who never lies continued. No more now, Menelaus. How long must you weep withering tears? What good can come of tears? None I know of. Strive instead to return to your native country. Hurry home at once. Either you'll find the murderer still alive, or Orestes will have beaten you to the kill. You'll be in time to share the funeral feast. So he pressed, and I felt my old pride for my grieving glow once more in my chest, and I asked the seer in a rush of winging words, "Those 2 I know. Now tell me the third man's name. Who is still alive, held captive off in the endless seas? Unless he's dead by now, I want to know the truth, though it grieves me all the more." "Odysseus," the old prophet named the third at once. "Laertes' son, who makes his home in Ithaca. I saw him once on an island, weeping live warm tears in the nymph Calypso's house. She holds him there by force. He has no way to voyage home to his own native land, no trim ships to reach, no crew to ply the oars, and sending him scudding over the seas brought back. But about your destiny, Menelaus, dear to Ares, it's not for you to die and meet your fate in the stallion land of Argos. No, the deathless ones will sweep you off to the world's end, the Elysian fields, where gold-haired Rhadamanthys waits, where life glides on in immortal ease for mortal man. No snow, no winter onslaught, never a downpour there. But night and day the ocean river sends up breezes, singing winds of the west, refreshing all mankind. All this because you are Helen's husband now. The gods count you the son-in-law of Zeus." So he divined, and down the breaking surf he dove. As I went back to the ships with my brave men, my heart a rising tide at every step. Once I reached my craft hauled up on shore, we made our meal, and the god-sent night came down, and then we slept at the sea's smooth shelving edge. When young dawn with her rose-red fingers shone once more, we hauled the vessels down to the sunlit breakers first, then stepped the masts amidships, canvas brailed. The crews swung aboard, they sat to the oars in ranks. and in rhythm churned the water white with stroke on stroke. Back we went to the Nile, swelled by rains of Zeus. I moored the ships and sacrificed in a splendid rite, and once I'd slacked the wrath of the everlasting gods, I raised a mound for Agamemnon, his undying glory. All this done, I set sail, and the gods sent me a stiff following wind that sped me home, home to the native land I love. But come, my boy, stay on in my palace now with me, at least till 10 or a dozen days have passed. Then I'll give you a princely send-off, shining gifts, 3 stallions, and a chariot burnished bright. And I'll add a gorgeous cup, so you can pour libations out to the deathless gods on high, and remember Menelaus all your days. Telemachus, summing up his new-found tact, replied, Please, Menelaus, don't keep me quite so long. True, I'd gladly sit beside you 1 whole year without a twinge of longing for home or parents. It's wonderful how you tell your stories. All you say, I delight to listen. Yes, but now I'm afraid my comrades must be restless in sacred Pylos, and here you'd hold me just a little longer. As for the gift you give me, let it be a keepsake. Those horses I really cannot take to Ithaca. Better to leave them here to be your glory. You rule a wide, level plain where the fields of clover roll, and galingale and wheat and oats and glistening full-grain barley. No running room for mares in Ithaca, though, no meadows. Goat, not stallion land. Yet it means the world to me. None of the rugged islands slanting down to the sea is good for pasture or good for bridle paths, but Ithaca, best of islands, crowns them all. So he declared. The lord of the war-cry smiled, patted him with his hand, and praised his guest, concluding, Good blood runs in you, dear boy. Your words are proof. Certainly I'll exchange the gifts. The power's mine. Of all the treasures lying heaped in my palace, you shall have the finest, most esteemed. Why, I'll give you a mixing bowl forged to perfection, its solid silver finished off with a lip of gold. Hephaestus made it himself, and a royal friend, Phaedimus, king of Sidon, lavished it on me when his palace welcomed me on passage home. How pleased I'd be if you took it as a gift. And now, as the two confided in each other, banqueters arrived at the great king's palace, leading their own sheep, bearing their hearty wine, and their wives in lovely headbands sent along the food, and so they bustled about the halls preparing dinner. But all the while the suitors before Odysseus's palace amused themselves with discus and long-throwing spears out on the leveled grounds, free and easy as always, full of swagger. But Lord Antinous sat apart, dashing Eurymachus beside him, ringleaders, head and shoulders the strongest of the lot. Phronius' son, Noemon, approached them now, quick to press Antinous with his question. Antinous, have we any notion of or not when Telemachus will return from sandy Pylos? He sailed in a ship of mine, and now I need her back to cross over to Elis Plain, where I keep a dozen horses, brood mares suckling some heavy-duty mules unbroken. I'd like to drive one home and break him in. That dumbfounded them both. They never dreamed the prince had gone to Pylos, Neleus' city. Certain the boy was still nearby somewhere, out on his farm with flocks or with the swineherd. Tell me the truth, Antinous wheeled on Noemon. When did he go, and what young crew went with him? Ithaca's best, or his own slaves and servants? Surely he has enough to man a ship. Tell me this, be clear, I've got to know. Did he commandeer your ship against your will, or did you volunteer it once he'd won you over? I volunteered it, of course, Noemon said. What else could anyone do when such a man, a prince, weighed down with troubles, asked a favor? Hard to deny him anything. And the young crew that I formed his escort, well, they're the finest men on the island next to us. And Mentor took command. I saw him climb aboard. Or a god who looked like Mentor head to foot. And that's what I find strange. I saw good Mentor yesterday, just at sun-up here, but clearly he boarded a ship for Pylos days ago." With that he headed back to his father's house, leaving the two lords stiff with indignation. They made the suitors sit down in a group and stopped their games at once. Eupeithes' son, Antinous, rose up in their midst to speak, his dark heart filled with fury, blazing with anger, eyes like searing fire. "By God, what a fine piece of work he's carried off! Telemachus, what insolence! And we thought his little jaunt would come to grief. But in spite of us all, look, the young cub slips away just like that. Picks the best crew in the land, and off he sails, and this is just the start of the trouble he can make. Zeus kills the brazen boy before he hits his prime. Quick, fetch me a swift ship and 20 men. I'll waylay him for ambush, board him coming back in the straits between Ithaca and rocky Same. This gallant voyage of his to find his father will find him wrecked at last." They all roared approval, urged him on, rose at once, and retired to Odysseus' palace. But not for long was Penelope unaware of the grim plots her suitors planned in secret. The herald, Medon, told her. He'd overheard their schemes, listening outside the court while they wove on within. He rushed the news through the halls to tell the queen, who greeted him as he crossed her chamber's threshold. "Herald, why have the young blades sent you now? To order King Odysseus' serving women to stop their work and slave to fix their feast? I hate their courting, their running riot here. Would to God that this meal here and now were their last meal on earth. Day after day, all of you swarming, draining our life's blood, my weary son's estate. What, didn't you listen to your fathers when you were children years ago, telling you how Odysseus treated them, your parents? Never an unfair word, never an unfair action among his people here, though that's the way of our God-appointed kings, hating one man, loving the next with luck. Not Odysseus. Never an outrage done to any man alive. But you and your ugly outbursts, shameful acts, they're plain to see. Look at the thanks he gets for all past acts of kindness." Medon replied, sure of his own discretion, "Ah, my queen, if only that were the worst of all you face. Now your suitors are plotting something worse, harsher, cruder. God forbid they bring it off. They are poised to cut Telemachus down with bronze swords on his way back home. He's sailed off, you see, for news of his father, to sacred Pylos first, then out to the sunny hills of Lacedaemon." Her knees gave way on the spot, her heart too. She stood there speechless a while, struck dumb, tears filling her eyes, her warm voice choked. At last she found some words to make reply. "Oh, herald, why has my child gone and left me? No need in the world for him to board the ships, those chariots of the sea that sweep men on, driving across the ocean's endless wastes. Does he want his very name wiped off the earth?" Medon, the soul of thoughtfulness, responded, "I don't know if a god inspired your son, or the boy's own impulse led him down to Pylos, but he went to learn of his father's journey home, or whatever fate he's met." Back through King Odysseus' house he went, but a cloud of heartbreak overwhelmed the queen. She could bear no longer sitting on a chair, though her room had chairs aplenty. Down she sank on her well-built chamber's floor, weeping pitifully as the women whimpered around her, all the women, young and old, who served her house. Penelope, sobbing uncontrollably, cried out to them, "Hear me, dear ones! Zeus has given me torment, me above all the others born and bred in my day. My lion-hearted husband lost long years ago, who excelled the Argives all in every strength, that great man whose fame resounds through Hellas right to the depths of Argos. But now my son, my darling boy, the whirlwinds have ripped him out of the halls without a trace. I never heard he'd gone, not even from you, you hard, heartless, Not one of you even thought to rouse me from my bed, though well you knew when he boarded that black ship? Oh, if only I had learned he was planning such a journey, he would have stayed, by God, keen as he was to sail, or left me dead right here within our palace. Go, someone, quickly. Call old Dolius now, the servant my father gave me when I came, the man who tends my orchard green with trees, so he can run to Laertes, sit beside him, tell him the whole story, blow by blow. Perhaps, who knows, he'll weave some plan. He'll come out of hiding, plead with all these people mad to destroy his line, his son's line of kings. Oh, dear girl, Euryclea, the fond old nurse, replied. Kill me then with a bronze knife. No mercy, or let me live here in the palace. I'll hide nothing from you now. I knew it all. I gave him all he asked for, bread and mellow wine. But he made me take a mighty oath that I wouldn't tell you. No, not till 10 or a dozen days had passed, or you missed the lad yourself and learned he'd gone, so tears would never mar your lovely face. Come, bathe now, put some fresh clothes on, climb to the upper rooms with all your women, and pray to Pallas, daughter of storming Zeus. She may save Telemachus yet, even at death's door. Don't worry an old man, worried enough by now. I can't believe the blessed gods so hate the heirs of King Arceisius. Through and through, one will still live on, I know it, born to rule this lofty house in the green fields far and wide. With that, she lulled Penelope's grief and dried her eyes of tears, and the queen bathed and put on fresh clothing, climbed to the upper room with all her women, and sifting barley into a basket, prayed to Pallas, Hear me, daughter of Zeus, whose shield is thunder, tireless one Athena. If ever here in his halls resourceful King Odysseus burned rich thighs of sheep or oxen in your honor, oh, remember it now for my sake. Save my darling son, defend him from these outrageous, overbearing suitors. She shrilled a high cry, and the goddess heard her prayer, as the suitors burst into an uproar through the shadowed halls, and one of the lusty young men began to brag. Listen, our long-courted queen's preparing us all a marriage with no glimmer at all how the murder of her son has been decreed. Boasting so, with no glimmer at all of what had been decreed. But Antinous took the floor and issued ordered, Stupid fools, muzzle your bragging now, before someone slips inside and reports us. Up now, not a sound, drive home our plan, it suits us well. We approved it one and all. With that he picked out 20 first-rate men, and down they went to the swift ship at the sea's edge. First they hauled the craft into deeper water, stepped the mast amidships, canvas brailed, made oars fast in the leather oarlock straps, while zealous aids in arms brought weapons on. They moored her well out in the channel, disembarked, and took their meal on shore, waiting for dusk to fall. But there in her upper rooms she lay, Penelope, lost in thought, fasting, shunning food and drink, brooding now. Would her fine son escape his death, or go down at her overweening suitor's hands? Her mind in torment, wheeling like some lion at bay, dreading gangs of hunters closing their cunning ring around him for the finish. Harried so she was, when a deep kind sleep overcame her. Back she sank and slept, her limbs fell limp and still. And again the bright-eyed goddess Pallas thought of one more way to help. She made a phantom now, its build like a woman's build, Iphithemis, yes, another daughter of the generous lord Icarius, Eumelus' bride, who made her home in Phaerae. Athena sped her on to King Odysseus' house, to spare Penelope, worn with pain and sobbing, further spells of griefs and storms of tear. The phantom entered her bedroom, passing quickly in through the door slit, and hovered at her head. She rose and spoke now. Sleeping, Penelope, your heart so wrung with sorrow, No need, I tell you, no, the gods who live at ease can't bear to let you weep and rack your spirit. Your son will still come home. It is decreed. He's never wronged the gods in any way. And Penelope murmured back, still cautious, drifting softly now at the gate of dreams. Why have you come, my sister? Your visits all too rare in the past, for you make your home so very far away. You tell me to lay to rest the grief and tears that overwhelm me now, torment me, heart and soul, with my lion-hearted husband lost long years ago, who excelled the Argives all in every strength, that great man whose fame resounds through Hellas right to the depths of Argos. And now, my darling boy, he's off and gone in a hollow ship, just a youngster, still untrained for war or stiff debate. Him! I mourn him even more than I do my husband, quake in terror for all that he might suffer either on open sea or shores he goes to visit. Hordes of enemies scheme against him now, keen to kill him off before he can reach his native land again. Courage, the shadowy phantom reassured her. Don't be overwhelmed by all your direst fears. He travels with such an escort, one that others would pray to stand beside them. She has power, Pallas Athena. She pities you in your tears. She wings me here to tell you all these things. But the circumspect Penelope replied, If you are a god or have heard a god's own voice, come, tell me about that luckless man as well. Is he still alive? Does he see the light of day, or is he dead already, lost in the house of death? About that man, the shadowy phantom answered, I cannot tell you the story start to finish, whether he's dead or alive. It's wrong to lead you on with idle words. At that she glided off by the doorpost past the bolt. Gone on a lifting breeze, Icarius's daughter started up from the sleep, her spirit warmed now that a dream so clear had come to her in darkest night. But the suitors boarded now and sailed the sea lanes, plotting in their hearts Telemachus's plunge to death. Off in the middle channel lies a rocky island, just between Ithaca and Same's rugged cliffs, Asteris. Not large, but it has a cove, a harbor with 2 mouths where ships can hide. Here the Achaeans lurked in ambush for the prince. So concludes Book 4 of the Odyssey. Thank you for listening.